Thank you very much, Governor Pataki. This was very enlightening. I think you covered a lot of topics, I think most of them, and I think you've left us with some challenges. And what I pull out of this, you really focused heavily on the environment. I think this is really a starting point, and it's you can see it in the work you've been doing in the past couple decades. But especially noting the need for us to go forward with both traditional and new technologies. And the fact that infrastructure, you brought infrastructure in several times, that infrastructure is where the investments are, it's where we make commitments. And so this is an area that I would be happy if you had some further thoughts on how we do this. We're looking at, we know we need to use the oil, but we know we're going to stop. And certainly in a couple hundred years, we won't be using much of it. We must have an objective to keep as much oil as possible in the ground. I mean, that's kind of, that would be a good ending point. The more that's in the ground, the better. So the sooner we can get onto those alternatives. But what kind of insights do people have? I mean, this is one we struggle with at the UN, and in bringing these meetings together, and we work in intergovernmental dialogues. How do we work with so many, almost 200 countries, working together with different priorities, economics, security, environmental concerns? A lot of these countries have different starting points, and they're in different places in this process. How do we bring this together where we can really advance the renewable and the alternatives agenda?
The key is to have a handful, at most 3 or 4 or 5, specific goals that are laid out as a challenge. I spoke largely in generalities, and that's fine, except at the end you have to get from the generalities to the specifics. And if we could have, say, a goal for rural developing countries where we no longer use those inefficient cooking devices and can replace them with something modern. If we can have a goal for the developed world where vehicles a significant percentage of the vehicles will get 60 or 70 miles an hour. If we can have a goal for countries that are going through deforestation, where incentive packages or programs will be put in place to stop that dramatic deforestation, then the globe can come together and seek to achieve those goals. I mean, I mentioned the Millennium Development Goal of ending extreme poverty and hunger by the end of the decade. Every one of us wants to see that happen. But what we ought to do is come up with 2 or 3 concrete steps to do that. And let me give you just one example in the United States, what I would do. The other point is I would be technology neutral. Governments, and in particular politicians, always want to pick the technology, pick the winners and losers. Well, technology changes very quickly. Science is evolving every minute. And for politicians to say, okay, corn ethanol will be the solution in the United States, ties us into something that, as technology develops, is obsolete and inefficient. So I think it should be technology neutral. And one example of what I do in the United States, I pass a law. Say, you develop a car that gets 70 miles a gallon, and the first 5 million you sell in the United States, you're not going to be subject to any corporate income tax at all on. The next 5 million, you pay a 5% tax. The next 10 million, you pay a 10% tax. You are incentivizing a solution and not a technology, and empowering the private sector, the entrepreneurial side, to achieve a public policy goal. And I think that's what we have to be. Have specifics, be technology neutral, and look to achieve public policy by empowering the entrepreneurial, private, and not-for-profit side.
Are there a couple of questions? I think we can take a couple of minutes. Hunter, please. Welcome.
You rightly, I think, said to be technology neutral, but a few minutes ago you were saying that what we needed was to bring the world's largest extension cord down from North Quebec. Consistency?
I'm not saying what that technology should be. I'm not saying how it should be. This is not, let me just give you an example there. When I was governor, we have AC transmission lines, we have DC transmission lines. We put in place the first high-temperature superconducting electric transmission cable as part of a grid anywhere in the world. It cost a fortune. Now, it was not then a practical solution. But as you look at the technology for a transmission corridor, you can look at high-temperature superconductivity. You can look at DC. You can look at AC. They're all different. I'm not saying which one. But what we do need is to get electricity from here to there. Is
what we need comfort in New York buildings, and
Both.
should you not start with the least cost and
That
work
is
up?
a very, very important question. And I think it gets to the essence of the issue, which is, shouldn't we be doing this instead of doing that? And my view is you have to do both. For us to say that, all right, we're going to limit clean energy coming into New York because we're going to work on efficiency is the wrong approach. We should be saying we are working on efficiency, in fact, requiring efficiency. And by the way, I passed the first green building tax credit anywhere in the world, and we built the first green high-rise residential building anywhere in the world in this city while I was governor. We have to do more of that. But on the other hand, we shouldn't limit the ability to bring in clean energy from other areas that will allow us to shut down some of the plants that aren't particularly efficient environmentally or economically today.
Take one more up there in the middle.
Can you hear me? Hi, Ethan Zindler with New Energy Finance. First, I want to commend you as a Republican governor as really being a trailblazer in this field and being one of the very first Republican governors to come out in support of this sector and speak openly on the climate change issue. There have now been a number of others, including Governor Schwarzenegger, Pawlenty, Christ, others who really deserve credit. But when we look to Capitol Hill, the Republican Party is pretty much lockstep against cap and trade and even against a national renewable energy standard. Why is there this difference between the governors at the state level and the members on the Hill in terms of the Republican Party, and what role can you play or are you playing to try and influence the policy process so that President Obama has something to take with him in his back pocket when he goes to Copenhagen in December?
You know, the reason I think that Republicans, by and large, are against the House version of the cap and trade is a reason that I share. What we did when we created the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative was first do an economic model on the impact it could have on energy prices in the economy and put in place a system where we were confident that we were not going to create significant dislocations that would negatively impact growth. The second thing is we gave the ability for the implementation of the programs to be revenue neutral, not use climate change as an excuse to gain government revenue, but look at it as an issue that is in the public interest, not the government's interest. The third thing we did was limit the sectors. We are dealing only with power generation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And when you look at Washington, I think we do need national cap and trade legislation. But I think the bill that was passed is far from revenue neutral. It generates multiple hundreds of billions in revenue to the federal government. And that should not be the purpose of this. Second is it gives the government far too much power as opposed to what we did with the central government, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And third is it's all sectors. And in particular, in these economic climate, when you're looking at manufacturing, and we need manufacturing jobs in the United States, and we have lost them now for some period of time, to put the United States manufacturers at a further economic disadvantage against countries that do not in any way take significant steps towards dealing with their climate change issues, I think economically far more than is appropriate. So I think, to make a long story short, we do need a national law on dealing with the issue of greenhouse gas emissions. But I think we need to do it in a way that reflects both the economic realities of today and the fact that the bill that has been proposed gives far too much power, far too much revenue to the federal government as opposed to looking at an environmental goal.
Thank you. Thank you very much.